He's the daddy of bringing all of this together here. He's the OG. He has brought so much to the world at this point. But he still chooses to have a career in tech and cyber because he's got fundamental baseline things he's got to pay for. But walk us through where you came from. Let's skip the gap. And what are you doing today?
Well, thank you very much for everybody for being here. For those that don't know me, I'm Eric Bellardo. I'm the founder and president of cesCyber. I've been in the field of cyber now for about 35, 36 years. So, when he said that I'm the OG, yeah, that's what he means. And, I love being here. Love helping people get into this career. I always tell people if I didn't love this thing of cybersecurity, I wouldn't be doing it for 35 years. So I'm glad that everybody's here. Let's hear about our other panelists here.
Thank you, Eric. I almost fell off my chair because that was about 15 seconds of you talking. I don't think anybody on the planet, we've got this recorded, people. We've got this recorded. He only spoke for 15 seconds. I'm sorry. Did I say that out loud?
You said
I thought it was
keep it short,
we just met, and I tell you, when we did our prep, I was like, yes, between the four of us, five of us, we're going to have so much fun. At least I will say, took me a little bit to find a few things on you, but there was a clear note of drive, and there was a clear note of discipline, and I was like, oh, okay, all right. So why don't you walk us through where you're at and where you've been and where you came from and where you're at now?
Hi, everyone. Thank you for taking the time to attend. I'm Evelides. I'm currently a security engineer at Google. Prior to that, I guess in the beginning, I grew up in Puerto Rico, did elementary school there, and soon after came to Rhode Island. I've spent most of my life in Rhode Island, pursuing my education in help desk and then cybersecurity, and computer science as well. Aside from that, I've had a lot of career areas. I spent some time in the military, and that's about it.
I love it. I love it. All right. Last and least, sorry, not least. Chris and I have been on the road with quite a few different efforts. I learned a few things about Chris. One, he likes to pull you into things the very last second. And then number two, I did this by accident. He doesn't like wearing socks at conferences. Outside of that, he's an industry leader and doing a whole lot of things. Tell us where you came from and what are you doing now?
So another immigrant, but from back in the UK. I'm from London originally. I've been in recruitment actually for 25 years, tech recruitment. Been in the States for 15 years, and in 2012 I started a cybersecurity staffing and professional services firm. It's called Tyro Security. Been very, very involved in the industry. So I was one of the founding directors and twice president of the SoCal Cloud Security Alliance chapter. I lead the industry advisory board for NSITE, the National Cybersecurity Training and Education Center. I'm on industry advisory boards for UNLV. I'm actually based out of Las Vegas, and also the Washington Cybersecurity Center of Excellence. So really involved in trying to help the next level of people come through into our industry. I'm also a really big ally. I'm one of the founders of Gracie, and that's GRC for Intelligent Ecosystems. Do a lot of work trying to bring diversity into our industry. I'm going to be speaking at RSA this year. It's my fourth time, and this year actually I've got three leaders from cybersecurity groups for diversity. They're going to be talking about that. So I'm a big proponent, big ally, and I'm probably the only one here that doesn't speak any Spanish. So I'm going to ask Mel maybe to teach me a little there.
my name is Raul, and I am originally from Venezuela. I'm a third generation immigrant because my grandparents were immigrants. My parents immigrated too, and I am an immigrant too. And my I guess my journey into IT and security was a little unconventional because my background is not technical at all. But I spent my whole career at United Airlines working in different departments and in operations, strategy, customer service, and I ended up in technology, which was very unexpected, but also proved that you can actually get to technology and cybersecurity from many different paths. During my career, I did experience a lot of burnout and stress, and so that's what I do now after my own journey and figuring out my health and my life. Now I help professionals like you and like me overcome stress and build careers that they love without burning out. And that's me.
Okay. So let's thank you though, everyone here. I think we all come from the same with the same values and beliefs of giving back, right? We know where we were and we know where we are, the ability to be able to give back and the ability to be able to help educate and elevate. This is why I'm honored to be working with Eric and Yaris on the Raíces Cyber program. So what I want to be able to do is just kind of um, open up the floor, and I think maybe we'll start off with Papa Cyber himself. You know, there's a lot of noise around a lot of things in cyber, whether it's entry, whether it's sustainability, whether it's toxicity, whether it's hiring. There's millions of jobs, this, that, and the other. Um, the journey for most of us has been very long to figure out what we want to do when we grow up, right? How are we trying to help address that with Raices and collaborating with the other programs, right? What's that path?
Well, I always tell people that the job that you're going to have when you first join the field of cybersecurity is not going to be the same job that you're going to have throughout your career. Um, they say that there's about 50 different trades, 50 plus different trades in the field of cybersecurity. And, it changes. It changes with things like AI right now and how we're securing AI and all these different things. But the first and fundamental thing is that I always say that I hate it when people say, I want to learn cyber. That's like saying, I want to learn healthcare. There's all these different trades. So I tell them, listen, what is it that you want to learn in cyber? You've got all these different trades. It's like I said, in healthcare, there's EMTs, there's doctors, there's nurses, there's x-ray techs, there's all these different jobs within cybersecurity. So find out which one is the one that lights your passion. And the second thing that I always tell people is they come to me and say, but I want to learn how to hack. And I always tell people, and I know all my red teamers out there are going to yell at me, but I always tell them, red teaming is not, or pen testing, red teaming is not a very good way to start in the field of cyber. And I know that's, challenging a lot of people out there. Yes, we have to learn how the enemy comes to us, the threats come to us, but there's very few entry level jobs in the red team pen testing. And we do people a disservice by coming into these jobs and training and learning and doing all these different things. And then they can't get a job because they don't have the experience. So I always tell them, start with something that you can get in. Enter the field with something like a blue team, security operations, tech support, all these different areas that give you that experience. So when you want to pivot to that pen testing or higher level other jobs, you have the experience behind you.
And this is perfect. And I wanted to kind of share the slides that we had prepared for this to hopefully give some folks a little bit of a narrative of where to go and what to do. What can you highlight as part of what we're presenting here?
So again, so as challenging you guys here, when we look at the credentials, right? Um, as we start in the field of cyber, education is very important, but education, there's different ways to get that education, right? Some people go the traditional route and go to college, get their degree in cybersecurity. And one thing that I tell people is, yes, you're going to get that degree, but remember that degree is going to be a very generalistic thing. Find what is your passion and what you want to learn in the field of cyber. That's one way to enter. The other way is getting those credentials, getting those certificates, right? But it's not just a certificate, it's the certificate plus some experience. And how do we gain experience? We gain experience by, doing things like doing your own home labs, doing CTFs, doing volunteering work, volunteer for an organization, volunteer for that mom and pop business down the street and say, let me help you secure this stuff. And you put that in your resume. And you have not only the certificates, but that experience to bind it together. And that's what's going to get you your entry level job. And then the third way that I always tell people that they join the field of cyber is by having a different job. As we see here in the presentation, there's IT feeder jobs, right? Your IT support, your tech, your help desk, your tech support, other things like that. But not only those techie fields, there are fields or career fields in cybersecurity that we need people like teachers for security awareness. We need people that our managers, our software developers, our different other people that feed in. You don't have to be a techie to be in the field of cyber. And the
I
only
love
thing that I'm
that.
going to challenge you, Mel, is that we put in their junior penetration testers. Even for junior penetration testers, you may require 1 to 3 years experience in the field already.
Yeah. Yeah, and I love this, and and I'm going to try not to talk a lot, but the experience piece is I mean, that's it. I will tell you, I had no money, I had no idea, what I wanted to do, but at the age of 14, I said, I'm going to get a job at the library because I love reading. Guess what they had at the library? They had a computer, right? It was unopened and it was unlocked, so I was able to do some coding and kind of learn from there. But finding those resources, right, to be able to say, how can I get that hands-on experience? That's number one. Two, asking people, say, hey, I don't have a computer. Where can I get access? And IESIS obviously is one of the programs that can get you exposure, can get you some training, can get you the networking and the components. And we'll talk about all that, but really branching out to find the resources. The hardest problem to get experience in, for example, Google or AD or anything else, is access to those technologies, right? So making sure that we focus on that. With that, I want to segue over to the Googler on this webinar. Evelides, walk us through kind of what you experienced in trying to segue into what you wanted to do, right? Because it's to Eric's point, we pick a lot of different domains that we want to maybe try. Walk us through how you got an entry point into some of these, and then what you recommend for others.
Sure. So for me, I started off in help desk, mainly helping people reset their passwords or install software. And from there, I joined the military. And in the military, they had a specialty that was IT. I went to school for, I don't know, 26 weeks, I think it was, and got a bunch of certifications through the military. That got me a lot of the knowledge that I needed to kind of establish like really good footing in IT and just my overall knowledge. And once I came back from the military, I ended up actually taking a full-time job with the DoD, and I learned more there. That job was system administration. So I went from IT support help desk to system administration. And it was like in a matter of a year, pretty much with the military experience, because I just learned so much there. And from the military, I actually went and joined Google. My path to Google was pretty much, I knew that the roles at Google were a bit different from traditional cybersecurity analysts because they build everything in house. So I knew that I would need to know some coding. So while I was working in while I was working for the DoD, I went and got a degree in computer science, which kind of gave me that coding background and allowed me to interview with Google and actually satisfy the requirements for the role. Just to kind of build upon what Eric said, it's nice to kind of transition from different careers, because I feel like in tech, the knowledge that you've learned before, it's not going to end up useless. Like you can just build upon it. Like I started off in IT, the stuff I learned in IT and like hardware, software, the inside of a computer, how software like works and stuff. That is actually still valid and useful to me as a cybersecurity, professional. All that stuff just builds upon each other.
I love that. And what I want to kind of segue into is because we've got a lot we can cover here, right? Again, the industry, the entry points. When we're looking at what we're trying to do, it is getting that exposure, but pushing for that, right? So there's a lot of trends, and I think I'm going to kind of skip a couple of things that we had planned. How do we get exposure? Right? Where do we get exposure? So one of the things that I push is, we do live in a world of introverts, right? We do live in a world of folks who don't know how to talk to other people, technical, social, or otherwise. And some people are just phenomenal, right? They're socialites, and they can go through that. Raul, what do you recommend to a person who is, who goes out twice a week, right? Doesn't know people in industry and area locally, what group, what situation? How do you recommend that they kind of do that outreach to make the connections, to ask the questions, to get the resources?
Yeah, that's a great question. And not only in this field, right? I think in general, being curious, right? I think when we are, I'm an introvert, right? And I spent many years in my career being very insecure, right? Always trying to say the same thing, say the right thing, and trying to look up to others who I thought were doing things right and try to imitate them, right? And by doing that, I was really just getting farther and farther from my own strengths and my own unique characteristics, which at the end of the day is the only thing that's gonna help us be successful, right? So being curious, being authentic, and always starting conversation from a place of service, right? Always, rather than asking ourselves who can help me and what can I get from X group, is how can I contribute and how can I add value? Because again, our strengths, regardless of where we are in our career, we always have something to share and something to contribute, right? And that's something that I think we underestimate, especially when getting started, because of that same insecurity, right? There's always something that we can contribute to the conversation.
And Raul, let me add to that it doesn't matter where you are in your journey, there's always somebody behind you. So
100%.
Reach back and pull somebody up, right? Because you may have learned something, teach that. And that supports the entire community.
Amen. That's like, I think I don't have any tattoos, but if I did, I would get something in that vein. It's like, reach back, because I tell folks, if you've got 1 month, 1 year, 5 years experience, you're guaranteed to have more than somebody else, right? If you've got 10 years and you're like, well, I'm only a SOC, SOC level 2. Guess what? There's people who don't even know what SOC stands for. So reach back. Raul,
Chris doesn't
you
use
type.
it.
No, he does not. He just
Doesn't use socks,
he doesn't
right?
even know how to spell sock. Yeah, yeah. So
So
he
confused.
thinks it's
SOS,
SOK. I mean,
SOC, SOCK, they all run into one.
yeah. So and Raul, you tapped on one thing that I think is important is range, right? And I love the book Range, and it talks about athletes and some and I can't remember who it was, but they used to do basketball and tennis and track and blah, 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 and they were able to build out muscles around different pieces, right? So experiences, techniques, but they honed in on tennis because that was what their passion was. And that's what I tell folks is, hey, you may not like installing updates. You may not like, working on networking issues. You may not like doing patch paneling and all kinds of other pieces. But guess what? You're getting experience and you're getting exposure so that when you think about the upper level piece of architecture, pen testing, you can actually visualize and see and have that hands-on experience and speak to that. So some folks are like, well, I will tell you right now, I'm going to call this out, Eric, because this is one thing, and I'll send folks the link. You can find me on LinkedIn. There was an industry leader who has thousands of followers on LinkedIn who put somebody on blast for recommending entry level could be IT admin or IT work. Blasted them live with a screenshot and everything. This was about a year ago or so. This was an industry leader in the cyber education field, and his followers droned in. The person was impacted both personally and professionally. They lost their job because of negative backlash. So when we talk about getting range and making recommendations, when you've got a level of toxicity that you have to expose it, but also you really actually are just making recommendations, it's the best way to get in. My first entry point was this Apple IIe at a library, right? Just because I learned on basic doesn't mean I'm any less than somebody who has their CISP or anybody, listen, no. So that range and that exposure is the most important thing. And I will tell you one thing I tell everyone, you have to take massive action, right? So whether or not you're networking, this, that, and the other, you have to act on it, right? So, put down the damn Xbox remote for an hour, go on Google, sorry, Eric, it's a thing. So with that, what I want to be able to tap into, Chris, is with you is how do you've got somebody who is literally wet behind the ears, they've just birthed themselves into cyber, right? And they come to you and they're like, you're a leading expert in placement and job placements. You work with CISOs and VPs. What do I do? What do you say to someone who, let's say it's your nephew, right? They're in college. They're all they're doing is drinking, and they're like, I want to, the whole cyber thing. I love that, Eric. It's like, I want to do cyber. Like, what do you say to them?
Well, there's a few, like you guys have covered an awful lot of stuff that I would advise. To be fair, I think Eric, you're a brother from another mother. I'm feeling here because all of the stuff that you're talking about is all of the stuff that I speak about. And there's a few things. So Mel, I have the Route to CISO podcast. So I interview CISOs about how they become CISOs, and I talk right from their foundations before they're in cyber. Very, 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 very few have their first job in cyber, right? Most come through IT. So that is what you're going to see. So you've got to be very open-minded in terms of how am I going to get into this? First off, where do you work currently? Are there any computers there? Who looks after them, right? Can you ask to help? My first job was a conference sales person. Actually, my first job was a travel agent, and I worked in their conference sales department. And then I ended up having an internet cafe, and they had an IT manager there, and he needed a hand. So I said, all right, how can I help you? And that got me interested in IT. Now, I ended up going into tech recruitment, which is really tech sales. But I still have some, I have a small amount of technical chops, I would say. Not enough to get me in any trouble, probably. But
that's a great point, Chris, because we talked about you don't have to be a techie to be in the field of cybersecurity.
Yes.
There's salespeople that we need in the field. So, sorry.
No, 100%. And even you can have a level of an understanding in technology and be working in perhaps more governance, right, related roles and things like that, where you don't need to be as technically savvy as somebody that's doing architecture work or whatever it might be. So there are absolutely a whole number of different opportunities in our industry. Like, how do you put yourself out there? Well, let's look at where you are right now. Let's look at who your network is. What relatives do you have? Like, who works in what companies? Can any of them get you into there's a lot of nepotism in every industry. Make use of it, right? Create your network, speak to the people you know who can help you get in to different places and build your network. I'm very, very busy on LinkedIn. And I have certain things that I advise people to do, and building your brand on LinkedIn, like talking about the parts of security you're interested in, and building the network around you for people that jobs that you would like to do, people you look up to, all of these sorts of people in the industry. You can do this online. You can try and find your local groups as well. I know Mel's very involved in building a local group. Like, just get involved in it. It's your network that's going to help you bridge that gap and get you your first opportunity.
I always say, Chris, to double click on your point there, is I always tell people, learn in public. Either write a blog just to keep what you've learned, and keep a diary, but do a blog. If you're camera worthy, do a YouTube channel or do a newsletter on and that starts building your brand. So when you're trying to get a job, people already know you, people recognize you, you have a following or you have connections, and build that network, because that's integral to getting into the field of cyber.
Yep.
Yeah. So let me just jump in right here, because last month I was in Denver presenting at ISACA, and Gail, I love you. Hopefully you're on. She opened up the whole day conference with, your network is your net worth, right? Who you pull in close, who you challenge yourself to learn from, is your net worth, right? And the networking component, getting yourselves out into a public forum, it could be a online chat, it could be a Discord, it could be whatever that is, understanding that you need to put yourself out there, and that vulnerability, and I talk about that in other segments and other pieces, but is so important, right? Finding the internet cafes, the your cousin who, your family who has a different network than yours, right? How do you analyze it and start playing around, and really kind of pushing yourself to find those opportunities for exposure, and then being okay to say, hey, can you show me how to do that? Hey, can you walk me through that, right? Because we're just, I listen. You're talking to, and I posted this picture like 100 times already. You're talking to a mustard wearing turtleneck little punk who had no idea, who was quiet, who was shy, who was, yes, an introvert. I'm not lying. Okay. So I have proof. And I had to break out of that, right? I had to kind of get over myself to be able to do these kind of things. And it's really, really important for all of us to take. And there's been a lot of great questions in the Q&A, and I've been answering them. One of them was just answered by Chris, because I that's why I segued a little bit differently. One thing that I want to go back to Raul on something, because I think this is going to be important, is when we talked about range and we talked about networking, we talked, how do we, because I've got folks who have psychology degrees, right? And they're like, oh my God, I love tech. I didn't realize, right? They have some revelation after decades. I'm like, shit, I've been in IT and cyber, as a sidebar this whole time. I've had this passion, right? They've got the TAT matrix on one arm, and they've got another one, so what do you say to folks who are like, well, I don't have the skills because I just spent 20 years in, being a therapist, or, 20 years being a childcare, what do you say to them? And if they've got that passion on how to leverage their skills, whether it's philosophy or psychology or historian, to kind of dive into cyber?
Yeah, I mean, it's a great question. I think my answer is actually very similar to what I said earlier. There's always something that we can contribute, right? Like I started my career in operations. I managed large stations at airports, and I worked a lot with customers one-on-one. I worked in strategy, and throughout my career, I created a set of skills and things that eventually, without me knowing it, were very helpful for my IT career. I was very close. I knew exactly what our customers at the airline wanted. I knew all of our systems. I know what our employees needed when it came to creating or serving our customers. And that's how I got involved in technology, because I had all of this knowledge that I was able to translate into tools that could help both our customers and our employees, right? So it's how do we translate those skills and create value, right? And again, I love your point. I mean, I never thought I was going to work in IT, and my first job in IT was really just gathering requirements and translating those. And through that process, I got very curious. I asked a lot of questions, and when we lose that fear of not knowing and asking questions, that's when we really start to grow, right? And I think that vulnerability also shows others that we not only are we willing to learn and listen, but that we also have something to contribute, right? And that we have a way to add value.
Yeah. So we've got a question in the chat which taps into about three different topics, and I kind of want to generalize it and then maybe go to Evelides. So there is I think I'm doing the right thing. I've got some experience. I've got, some hands-on training. I think my resume presents me well. I think my LinkedIn presents me well. Why the hell am I not getting interviews? Why am I getting ghosted? Why, what is going on, right? And there's a lot of global pressures, national pressures right now. I don't need to get into that, but there's also personal and financial pressures, right? That people just keep getting beat down, right? I'm not looking at you, Chris, for ghosting your candidates or anything else like that.
Don't do that.
Being a recruiter, but Evelides, as you're kind of going through, because and I love, by the way, I love there's more military experience on this call than probably in most calls that I've been in, right? When you're looking at building up that discipline and kind of forging through things that you don't know, there, right? How do you stay confident? How do you kind of and we'll go back to you, Raul, because I know you've got some pieces. I've got some pieces on how do we help kind of get through. But how do you stay confident, Emily, is or help someone stay confident when they're like, I've been job searching for 9 months. I can barely pay the rent. I'm living out of my car. I have some skills. No one's giving me a break. How do you kind of help that scenario?
So what I can say at least about the cybersecurity field is that there's no shortage of jobs. Like every company will have some type of, if they have an online presence, they will probably have cybersecurity postings. Even I feel like with entry level roles, you don't need to have a lot of skill. I feel like when you're interviewing for an entry level role, the most important thing is your ability to kind of show how you think, like being able to think critically. Cybersecurity is pretty much, we're dealing with a lot of unknowns. If you're dealing like on a response side, you're going to get stuff that sometimes you're not going to know what it is. You're not going to know how to respond. So a lot of companies, especially if you're interviewing for a role like that, will want to see that you have the ability to kind of thrive in the unknown. There's a lot of I've dealt with my share of rejections. I'm actually, so the way that I got to Google, I'll just throw this in because I think it's really good advice for anyone who's kind of trying to stand out on an application or for a role. I wasn't even really looking to switch jobs when I interviewed for Google. I was actually on my final year of my computer science degree. I was pretty much struggling because those courses were really hard. So I was not looking to switch jobs or add any more change. But I went to the Grace Hopper conference, which is a conference for women in computing, back in like 2018, and they have this really great career fair with all the big companies. And before you go, they tell you upload your resume just in case. I uploaded my resume, and I actually was contacted by 2 recruiters, one for Google and one for Facebook. And I wasn't a standout student in any way. I was just pretty average. I didn't do any extra clubs or anything. I like to think I just got lucky. But with those interviews, I will say that the main thing that they were looking for was just seeing how I think. Like, they just told me, like, talk through the process, think out loud. I think the worst thing that that can happen in an interview is if you just stay quiet. And yeah, there's going to be jobs that you might interview for that it might not go so well, or you might not get the call back. At the end of the day, we don't, nobody really knows why. It could be that the job wasn't a good fit, or, something else. But I would say really focus on your strengths and kind of like where you can stand out. So if you have a military background, and if you have a clearance of any sort, you might do well with a government contractor. You'll stand out there because you have a kind of an upper hand there. So you just kind of have to highlight your strengths and know them.
Yeah.
And there's another point that you brought up there that I really want to tug on that. Okay. And I want anybody that is hearing me to really listen. Put your recording on. The field of cybersecurity is so big and the jobs are so broad. Nobody can know everything about cyber. The one biggest skill that you need to succeed in this field is the ability to research, the ability to go find the information. And as a 3-time CISO, hiring hundreds of people, I can tell you that one of the biggest things that I look at is, can you Google it? Can you go to YouTube? Can you figure it out on your own? And when you can't figure out, do you have the humility to ask somebody for help? But the ability to research something is the one key skill in the field of cybersecurity.
And that starts
Yeah.
early, right? If you're applying, that starts before you apply for the job. It starts when you apply for the job. It starts before you go for an interview. Like, there's so many areas where these, like the failure to prepare, like ruins your opportunities that you do get. And you're fighting and working so hard to get those opportunities. It's crazy that people don't spend enough time preparing when they do come up. So, every resume should be different and pointed towards the specific job you're going for. Who do you know at that company? Is there any friends of friends at that company? Who at LinkedIn, who can you see that you can maybe connect with and ask questions of? Does anybody
Let me put this in language. Let me put this in language that maybe some folks who have been reading a lot of cyber or doing a lot of cyber can understand. OSINT and social engineering. Right. So when you talk about hackers who are social engineering you, this, that, and the other, and you're doing OSINT and you're getting details about somebody and creating a profile and trying, right? That's what you need to do when you're looking at a company, when you're looking at a role, when you're looking to, how do I meet Chris? Well, let me find out a little bit about Chris. Let me try to troll his. Yes, I will tell you right now, if you see that I've looked at your LinkedIn profile, I am trolling you. I'm analyzing your personality. I'm trying to figure out if there's a hook. I'm trying to figure out how do I reach out to this person. And the biggest piece, and this is how I built my network, this is why I focus on this kind of stuff for the last 5 years. The biggest piece about this is if I can help them and I see that they genuinely need help, I will try to make time or I will offer. And I'm about to make an offer here, Eric and Yadis, in a second to help some of the questions that are in the Q&A. But if I think that I can learn something from them, and not that I need something from them, but I can learn from something, I use one word in my LinkedIn intro, because I'll always add a little note. I'll say, hey, Raul, I love what you're doing in mental health. I was wondering if we could hop on a call to get some advice. Advice. Not, I need a job, Not, hey, can you help me with this role? Not, can you help me introduce me to this person? Because at that point, you're just trying to use that person. You need to build a relationship and ask them for advice. If the rapport is there and you're genuine and you're open and you can showcase that you're just a great freaking person, they will want to volunteer to help you, right? The approach, that range piece, and it's again going back to the QA, one of the QA questions. That range piece is, what do I focus on? I'm in college, I'm doing this, I have some experience. Is continue to get involved and continue to go do that, but then ask for advice. I guarantee you're in a university. Uh, you've got probably 20 or 30 different computer people who work there that you can ask them for advice, right? One of the reasons why I value what Eric and Yaris in this program is doing is I didn't have those mentors. I had people who guided me and they said, yeah, go to the right. And then I'm like, okay, I go to the right and I'm in a nebulous and then I have to, do the research. And, there wasn't Google back then, right? There was Alta Vista, right? And, I'm dating myself, right? And AOL, right? There was Prodigy, right? So we didn't have the level of resources that everybody has now. But now you have that. You've got YouTube. You've got all kinds of other programs. But you've got to push yourself and you got to keep doing that. So what I want to make sure everybody understands is, yes, programs like Raices and others are here to help, but you have to put that effort forward. I'm going to offer this to Yaris and Eric, and I've done this before. One of our next webinars that we'll host will be on how to showcase your current skills, but also how to do the networking and interviewing. So I've done this with live resume makeovers. We're doing this as part of another group that I just started in March. So I'm going to do live resume makeovers. We're going to do interview and how to pitch and how to work with people like Chris and to explain to them what you do or what you're passionate about. And I will tell you one last piece on the resume component and then how you kind of showcase yourself on LinkedIn. I tell folks, you may have a one-page resume. If you've got enough experience, you may have a two-page resume. If you're an industry leader, you may have a three. If I get to the bottom of your resume, I may be interested, but I want to get to know who you are. So if I don't see that you've got certs or you're in the process of doing something and I see you also don't volunteer, I don't know who you are. I can't value a connection, right? So, and then here's the other piece. It's not all about that title. If I look at your resume and I see that you're a certified scuba diver, that's a connection point. That's a cultural point. That's something that I can say, wow, like this guy has some experience. Let me get in a conversation with them and ask them, how did they get, they're still in college. How did they get scuba certified, right? That kind of personal connection, that openness is what I talk about. Because if I get to that bottom of your resume, I need to find a connection to see who that person is. Because it could be the most pristine technical presentation of what you've done, but it's flat and it's dry. So show up, be vulnerable. That's why I am the way I am. People give me a whole lot of, but we're coming up into 10 minutes. We've been answering a few of the questions with regards to that, some of the job pieces. The burnout component and the stress component of this is massive, right? You hear all the metrics. There's millions of jobs. You're like, where the are they? Because I'm sitting here on my 700th job submission this month, and I'm not hearing anything. Obviously, the networking and focusing. What do you tell folks, right? I mean, I do box breathing, I do meditation. There's a whole lot. I'm on my second cup of coffee in just 50 minutes, right? So I'm highly caffeinated. How do you tell people? What do you tell people to focus on? Eric, why don't we start with you?
Well, a couple of things. When it comes to that 700 job application, okay. I always tell people, look at that networking, right? Because we have these things called the automated, talent trackers and all these systems. And if the job and your resume, like Chris said earlier, tailor your resume to that job description, because those automated trackers are only looking at, the keywords. So that's what's going to get you through the front door. The rest is what you do, how you show up. Okay. And you've heard different strategies here. Another thing that Evelides said is go to these events. Okay. There are conferences and job fairs. Rice has a yearly conference, RISESCon, that's coming up later in the year. We have all these big companies. They're looking for people. Those are the talent acquisition people that show up at these conferences, show up at these events, also show up at these, if there's a local group, if there's a local chapter to you, show up because listen, I will give you a short story here. In our Discord, in the cesCyber Discord, we had a gentleman that came in there one day and said, I just won a government contract. I need to hire 10 people. And 10 people from cesCyber were hired that same day just because they were in that Discord. So there is an element of luck in that, but it's also be prepared for it, right? Be in the right place. Give yourself that unfair
Yeah.
advantage. And then on
I
the
love this, Eric. Let me just chime in real quick because I want to. So very quickly, hey, what group should I join? Blah 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 blah. If there's not a local Raíces chapter near you, here's an idea. Start one, right? Pull in that could have that experience, right? Reach out to us so we could say, hey, if it's too far away from you, start a new one. Number one. Number two, where do I find these groups, Eric? Meetup, Eventbrite, do the searches. I have a whole slide that has almost 30 conferences and about 15 or 16 major organizations, right? You've got to do the work, right? I'm sorry, people. Yes, put down the remote, put that, the Xbox remote. You've got to do the work. Right. That's the kind of stuff that I'm talking about. I love this. Woof.
And for the stress piece, look, guys, every job has its own level of stress. It's how you personally need to learn the skills and these are personal skills, right? Some people, like Mel just said, love playing PlayStation, right? Or anything like that, right? Other people love playing on the computer. Other people like going for a walk or anything like that. Find out what it is that you do to relax. And I know a lot of people that are in entry level that are trying to get into the field, and I talk to them and they say, oh my God, I'm studying for this test and I'm like studying 24/7. And when they're not studying, they're going to try hack me, or they're, here or there, and their lives are cyber, right? And that's great for some people, but take a break. We all need a break.
But so closing words, you're in the hot seat, and I'll go back to you last, Eric. Chris, closing words.
Well, I think there's been a lot of amazing advice on here. I think you do make your own luck, so you have to work very hard at this sort of stuff. Um, I know people that have done 400, 500 applications, and actually had somebody I put a panel on in InfoSec World with first-time cybersecurity people in their very first job. One of them 500 applications before they got their role. They actually got their role from going to a conference and meeting somebody, not from the 500 applications. So it's all of the personal, the you putting yourself out there, meeting people. That's more likely how you're going to get the role. And be very open-minded as to how you get into it. Any job that you take might be the one that gets you into cyber. So just be open-minded.
For everybody who's questioning, how do I get to those conferences? If they're local enough to you, ask them to see if they can give you a scholarship or remove the fees. That's one. Raul, walk us through where you're at, brother. Closing words.
Yeah, so one of the things that and we didn't have a chance to talk much about that is invest in yourself, right? Being here today, investing this hour in yourself is important, right? So all of the skills, all of the tools, all of the education is great, but if you are not creating a mindset, a positive mindset, it's actually contagious. It comes out in interviews, it comes out in messages, it comes out in DMs, and be okay with no. I mean, you are gonna get. I think I saw a comment saying, I got more no's than yeses. Yes, that is the path, right? All of those no's are not failure. They are the path to your
Yes.
yes. That will
Yeah.
come.
I'm just gonna say this, Raul. You know, I was gonna have my closing words, and I was gonna bestow this beautiful knowledge that I read. You just took my two thunderous comments. Invest in yourself and everything. I love this. Yes, thank you, Emilides. Talk to us. Let's see how we close this out.
So I guess my last few words of advice would be, and it ties back into the question someone asked, how, how do we pick a specialty? Like, do we have to specialize in anything? For cybersecurity, I think the most important thing is kind of foundational knowledge. Like it's been mentioned several times, there are several layers. You can choose, to be a cybersecurity expert in networking. You can choose encryption. There's a lot of different things. But I think for entry level, if you're trying to, just like, it's good to just have a good foundational knowledge, kind of know overall just how things work, where the vulnerabilities are, what are the biggest threats. Just have a really good understanding of the foundational stuff. And I think that once you have that foundational knowledge, you can kind of choose a specialty after that. But I think the most important thing is just getting your foundational knowledge and then later on picking, what you want to specialize in.
I love that. And here we are, one more person, the apex that kicked this off years ago. Papi Chulo, Papa Cyber, whatever you think you want to call yourself and other people call you. Eric, close us out with your words of wisdom on how we move forward.
I don't know about wisdom, but I'll give you some words. Okay, here you go. So if you're looking to be in the field of cyber, be curious, invest in yourself. Here, I'm going to take it away from you, Mel. Invest in yourself, invest in learning. Okay. Invest in a coach, invest in, what's the quickest way to achieve that transformation is to find out the plan that other people have traversed. You've got Raul, you've got Mel, you've got myself. We're all coaches. Okay. In any sport, if you want to learn how to be your best, you have a coach telling you this is the way that you should do it, or guiding you down a path. Invest in that. Invest in courses. Invest in learning. And never stop being curious. I saw a question that came in here that said, what about AI and all that stuff? Listen, the field of cybersecurity changes every 2-3 years. With the new technologies, we have to adapt. When I started, it was the dawn of the internet, right? Then it was cloud security. Now it's AI. Okay. We have to continue to learn.
Yaris, Eric, this great panel. I want to thank you for creating a space today and in the last few years to help advance, educate, and elevate. Everybody, I'll tell you right now, everybody who there's 60 some odd people on this call that we all of us should be getting LinkedIn requests. I should be seeing people trolling my LinkedIn, right? Be open to be able to connect. Just remind me where we met. Hey, I heard you in the Raíces piece. That way we can continue that conversation. Everyone here is a giver, right? Yaris is an incredible leader. Eric is an incredible leader. All of us are here to help, right, with what we can and how we can do this. Thank you to the panelists. Yaris, if you want to speak
Great.
to this.
We just want to make sure that people know that you can continue this conversation by joining our cesCyber community. So we will be sharing the slide with you where you can scan the QR code, and then you will be able to join our community and chat with other cybersecurity experts. There are many events coming up, so please make sure that you reserve your tickets. These are all free. And yeah, thank you so much for joining us. You will be receiving a copy of the recording. And like Mel said, and all the panelists, join them, link with them, make sure that they know your name and that they know that you were here. And I cannot thank enough all the panelists that took, for taking your time today, share your wisdom, share your journey, and lifting others. Thank you so, so much.